The Cincinnati Bengals finished the 2022 season with a 12-4 record and made the playoffs for the second time in the Joe Burrow era. And for the second time in the Joe Burrow era, they made it to at least the AFC Championship game. And while the Bengals have had a successful last 2 years, getting to the AFC Championship game or even going to the Super Bowl is not enough. And their goal entering the 2023 season is simple, and it's to win a Super Bowl. Their path certainly isn't going to be easy to get there, but out of any of the team previews we have done, where if things go right for a team and things bounce their way, yeah, maybe they have a shot at winning a playoff game and getting bounced in the divisional round of the playoffs. That does not apply to Cincinnati. They are a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and as franchise quarterback Joe Burrow once said, "Our Super Bowl window is open as long as I'm here." And the question entering the season for them is, will they win the Super Bowl this year? Well, we're going to try and answer that in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing what the Bengals must do in 2023 in order to achieve their goal, which is of course to win the Super Bowl. They're done with division-winning t-shirts and celebrating division titles. Yes, they want them this year, as every team does, but they want to kiss the Lombardi on Super Bowl Sunday. And they have to do something they did not do in 2022, which is start off on the right foot. They started the year 0-2 with losses to the Mitch Trubisky-led Steelers and the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys, and eventually dropped to 2-3 with a Week 5 loss in Baltimore. We all remember the ugly Monday night loss in Cleveland on Halloween night, but believe it or not, that was Cincinnati's final loss of the regular season. And as we know now, those early losses came back and bit them in the rear end, and instead of playing the AFC Championship game at Paycor Stadium, they had to travel to Arrowhead in a game they would go on to lose with a score of 23-20. And their season this year starts in Cleveland, and Cincinnati will no doubt be looking for revenge after the 19-point whomping Cleveland put on them last year. And to be clear, since he did beat them the second time they played last year, but they certainly do not forget how they felt after getting beat by the Jacoby Brissett-led Browns on Monday Night Football. After that, they come home to play Baltimore, and while these games are going to be two hard-fought division games right off the bat, there's no reason since he can't start the year 2-0. I would be shocked if they don't beat the Rams in Week 3, and a 3-0 start compared to a 1-2 start, which is what they were through 3 games 1 year ago, makes a massive difference, especially when you're trying to keep up with 15 in red for the conference rival Chiefs. We're not going to go over every game like this in depth, but looking at the rest of their games before their Week 7 bye, is 6-0 unreasonable for the Bengals? I don't think so, and the biggest thing that's going to have to go right for them is health, and as we know, Joe Burrow recently strained his calf in practice and is expected to miss, quote, several weeks, end quote. Now, this video will be released in the first week of August, and I don't think him missing practice this time of year, especially with the chemistry he already has with Jamar and T. Higgins, is going to be in trouble given the history these guys have together. That moment scared everyone in Southwestern Ohio, but as of now, the indication is he will be good to go by the regular season. Unfortunately, receiver Jamar Chase missed time during the 2022 season, and the Bengals went 3-1 without him as they played 4 non-playoff teams during the time he was out, but that's something obviously the Bengals want to avoid this year. And I think there will be an award prediction on the channel at some point prior to the regular season, and spoiler, Jamar will be one of the top 2 or 3 guys I would choose in my preseason pick for the Offensive Player of the Year award. 2023 is a big year for not only the Bengals as a team, but it's also huge for wide receiver T. Higgins as he is entering a contract year. And if people aren't talking about the Bengals' lofty preseason expectations and what they could do this year, then they're talking about something else, which of course is money. And money isn't a conversation that only involves quarterback Joe Burrow, as he is in line to receive really at minimum a $250+ million contract whenever his camp and the Bengals agree to a deal. It's really a matter of time, and for Burrow, given Justin Herbert just signed a 5-year deal worth $262.5 million, we often see quarterbacks set a new record every time it's time for someone to get paid. We saw it with Jalen Hurts, then immediately after Jalen, we saw it with Lamar, and a few weeks after Lamar, we saw it with Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow is next in line to get paid, and given the calf injury in practice, I would assume Burrow's side would rather get the deal done sooner rather than later, as the NFL can just as easily stand for not for long. So I do anticipate Burrow getting paid soon, and even in this scenario if he doesn't, because no matter how you slice it, Joe is under contract in the 2024 season because he was a first-round pick and the Bengals picked up his fifth-year option. Wide receiver T. Higgins is not under contract for the 2024 season, and this is his final year on his rookie deal. And given how notorious the Bengals are for not paying their guys top dollar, goes back to ownership. And believe it or not, all ownerships are not created equal, because having however many billions the Waltons do, the owners of the Broncos, versus what Mike Brown, the Bengals owner, has in terms of liquid cash, which is needed in order to pay players, are two entirely different figures. Brett Coleman did a tremendous breakdown on this on his channel, and this is being brought up for the Bengals preview because there's a lot of people that think this trio of Burrow, Jamar, and T, well, they think it's their final season together in Cincinnati. And time will obviously tell with this and whether or not T gets paid and stays a Bengal for the next few years, because right after Burrow's contract extension comes Jamar's, and this goes back to having the money set aside to be able to pay these players to begin with. And the reason we bring this up for the Bengals 2023 season preview is this has to be noted before the season starts, and it's that there's a very real possibility this is the final year we see these three players playing together wearing black and orange. We will soon find out whether or not it is T. Higgins' final season in Cincinnati, but no matter how the 2023 season plays out for the Bengals, I do believe this is Joe Mixon's final year in the Queen City. I'm sure you guys have heard about running backs recently and how they want to get paid and everything in this nature, and you can't blame them for wanting to get their dollar or their bread, but Joe is 27 years old and is showing signs of decline. He had a singular 100-yard rushing game last year, which was an outburst he had against the Carolina Panthers, as he would go on to rush for 153 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he also had an additional 58 yards receiving and a receiving touchdown too. However, if you take away what was a clear outlier in terms of the average of what he did per game last year, he had 661 yards rushing in the other 13 games, which would be an average of just 50.8 yards per game and an average of just 3.5 yards per carry. And whether it would be a 6th round running back or a UDFA or really anybody, it's not going to be hard to replace what Mixon is doing at a fraction of the cost. And it is believed by some that they already have Mixon's replacement on the roster in rookie 5th rounder Chase Brown from Illinois. I think the role of Chase Brown will increase throughout the year, but one thing the Bengals have to do better this year offensively is protect Joe Burrow. Jonah Williams allowed 43 pressures and 12 sacks last year per PFF, and they brought in Orlando Brown Jr. in free agency. And Orlando is an upgrade at left tackle, as it's truly hard to get worse or to downgrade from what Jonah was to Burrow's blindside last year, but what I don't want there to be confusion on is Orlando is not an elite franchise-changing left tackle. Yes, he is an upgrade, but he's not an elite player by any means. The big wild card of the Bengals offense is tight end Irv Smith, who has the talent to play at the NFL level, and it's more of a matter of him being able to stay healthy. It is important to know with Irv that even if he maximizes what he can do this year in Cincy, he will not be the most productive player on the stat sheet because of all of the guys in front of him. Jamar, T, and Tyler will more often than not all be a bigger focus in the offense than Irv, and that's by default. There may be a play or two here or there where Irv is the number one guy Burrow looks at, but obviously more often than not, that will go to Jamar, T, and Tyler. From a projection standpoint entering the year, I think Burrow will throw for around 4,700 yards and 36 touchdowns, along with 11 interceptions. And within that, I think Jamar will have a new career high in receiving yards, and T will too. And believe it or not, T's career high in receiving yards is only 1,091 yards, and given he is in a contract year, I wouldn't doubt the Bengals having two 1,300 plus yard receivers. The Bengals defense heading into 2023 is very good too, and they are led by a guy who I expect to get a head coaching job soon in defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. Since he finished 23rd in passing yards allowed last year, which initially doesn't sound very good, but they finished 4th in passing touchdowns allowed, meaning they really tightened up in the red zone. And if you follow the Bengals and what they did this offseason, or more so what previous Bengals players did, then you know both Jesse Bates and Von Bell left in the offseason, as both players are now in the NFC South. But the Bengals knew Bates was going to leave at some point and that it was a matter of time, and they planned for this by selecting Dax Hill in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. And I loved the Dax Hill pick at the time because it was a redshirt year for him in his rookie year, and there's no doubt in my mind Jesse was helping out with everything he could, knowing the business of the NFL was going to eventually take place. I mean, Jesse knew the plan when Dax was drafted, and in 2023, we will see the unleash of Daxton Hill. But I especially like the 2023 draft for the Bengals, as they brought in Myles Murphy from Clemson with their first round pick, and Michigan corner DJ Turner with their second round pick. And they recently agreed to a 1-year extension with Trey Hendrickson, who, believe it or not, is 4th in the NFL in sacks since 2020, with 35.5 over the past 3 years. And if you're expecting Myles to come in and wreak havoc right away, then I think you should temper your expectations, because he's going to be a situational player in year 1, and Lou Anarumo knows how he wants to use him this year. And the way I think this plays out is when it's 3rd and 7 in the 4th quarter in the divisional round or even the AFC Championship game in the playoffs, let's bring a guy who's fresh and has only played 6 or 12 snaps all day compared to the opposing offensive line's 57 snaps played and are exhausted at this point in the game. A pass rushing trio of Hubbard, Hendrickson, and Murphy is something I absolutely love in this conference, and ultimately in a conference where you have to get after the quarterback. And trust me, Bengals fans, I did not forget about one of the most underrated players in all of football, and that is the big guy in the middle of all of it, Mr. DJ Reader. There are so many guys on this defense, whether it's any of the pass rushers, Jermaine Pratt, Mike Hilton, or even Chidobe Awuzie. Their main job, which for a unit coached by Lou Anarumo, is very, very manageable, and it's going to be to hold teams to 21 points or less. And in the games they did that in 2022, they went 8-2 with the only losses coming to the Cowboys and Ravens. And in those 2 games, quarterback Joe Burrow was sacked 9 times combined, which is not a good recipe to win. So more or less, if the Bengals do what they are expected to do, which granted is to be a very good defense this year because that's the type of respect Lou has around the league, they should be at minimum a top 10 unit, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're a top 5 defensive team. The Bengals have everything they need in order to compete for a championship, as they have a top 3 quarterback in the league along with one of, if not the best receiving duos in all of football. And the biggest thing for the Bengals and their season outlook is, if there's a week or two where the Bengals aren't playing up to the standard they're used to offensively, the defense can more than hold their own. They played the Chiefs in Week 17 on New Year's Eve, and there's a very good chance this could be for the number 1 seed in the AFC. And as we know, home field in the playoffs means everything. They have one goal this year, and it's very simple: Super Bowl or bust. I hope you enjoyed the Bengals preview, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as only about 29% of people watching are subscribed. So if you did, please help the channel, as it takes a second to do and makes a monumental difference. And until the next team preview, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.